So as I'm living, I'm not afraid to say, bro, I cry. Man, my sons make me proud. And even though my dad never verbalized that, I knew what he meant. So now what's different is the patience that my children teach me without telling me, Pop, Dad, this is how.
Hey guys, welcome to Little Black Book 91. Listen, I want to do this video for you guys, a quick one. On this channel, we've been talking about attachment styles the entire time. And what's really powerful is that what he just said there. He said that for him, in his childhood, his dad never said he was proud of him, or the way that he never really, maybe didn't say it enough, but he was kind of new. And I think that is critical, because whenever we talk about attachment styles, which is basically how we emotionally attach in relationships to people, which is based upon the work by Mary Ainsworth and John Bowlby, British psychologists, what they talk about is that as children, the way that we formulate our attachments through our relationship with our caregivers, our parents, is how we often attach in relationships. When I listened to Cam on this interview, what I got was somebody who dismisses his own needs and then dismisses the needs of others, or at least dismisses his own emotions and then dismisses other people's emotions. I'll play a clip for you guys in a few seconds and you'll see what I mean by the emotions. But the key word here that he mentioned is that for him as a child, he never got told that his father was proud of him. And that is something that is very heavy on a lot of young males specifically. But as humans in general, we all need to feel like our parents are proud of us. We all need to hear those words. Just saying that my parents showed me that doesn't mean anything. You need to hear those words, right? Because that's what we call a verbal affirmation. And I think there's, for me, listening to doing coaching for the last kind of 4 or 5 months, seen over 200 to 300 clients, what I've come to understand is this: 3 A's: appreciation, acknowledgement, and I always get a third A, it always runs away from me, but appreciation, acknowledgement, and affirmations, right? Everybody needs them. And so, especially with dismissive avoidant people, which is basically dismissive avoidant means that you yourself, the way that you attach in relationships, you avoid the emotional connection, the deeper emotional connection. You avoid getting too close to people, right? Because you have a high esteem of yourself and a low esteem of others, meaning you trust you as being a hyper independent person. You don't like asking for help. You want to do things on your own. You like your autonomy, but you struggle to ask for help or to invite other people on board because you don't want to seem like you're weak and you're too vulnerable. You've been taught to be to be solo and to be on your own, right? And to handle things on your own from a very young age, right? And so when you hear what Cam was saying, I really could see the dismissive avoidant kind of perspective coming through here, and understanding how that as a child, if your parent doesn't want to affirm you in that way, it can make you great in the sports that you do and the achievements that you do in academics. But when it comes to actual interpersonal relationship, you can suffer heavily. And the reason why you'll suffer heavily is because when you are relating in relationship, the way that you've been taught is that you don't need other people. You only need yourself. You don't need other people to be with you because you only have yourself to depend upon. And depending on other people is actually a recipe for disaster. What does that mean? It means that when you went to your caregiver for your emotional needs and your wants, okay, what would end up happening is either your parents would emotionally neglect those needs and wants. For instance, like you just said, not mentioning the fact that they are proud of you, right? That is an emotional neglect area. The child needed that affirmation from the parent, didn't receive it, and it can lead to areas of feeling like you're not being acknowledged and you're not being appreciated. Now, if you listen to the actual interview, you will hear a lot of Cam trying to explain why he did what he did and explain how he got to a place where he had 8 kids, 3 baby mothers. Why does he keep trying to explain it? Well, the reality of the situation is because one of the things about dismissive avoidance is that they have core wounds. And in fact, I'm going to bring up my screen so you actually can see it as well. In a second, I'll bring my notes. One of the core wounds for the dismissive avoidance is that they don't like being misunderstood. They have, I think they have 3 core wounds: rejection, abandonment, and also being misunderstood or misjudged. And there's a 4th one, which is that their needs are not going to get met, right? They feel like their needs are not going to be met, so they try to avoid trusting other people for their needs to be met. So hearing him explain why he got to the 8 baby mothers and almost giving himself credit for the fact that life is lifing, rather than actually really being accountable and saying, actually, yeah, I've made mistakes and actually this is what I should have done. He gives himself credit for making it through and making the best of the situation. For instance, when he says, oh, my dad and me are different because when he goes to 7-Eleven, it's not the same as me going to 7-Eleven. He's absolutely right. What's that got to do with women though? Right? What he's really trying to say is, let's make a distinction between my dad and me. I had different challenges to face. I had to face these challenges that he doesn't have to face. I get women throwing themselves at me, panties thrown at me. I get women who want to have a baby by me. My dad never have to face that. I hear it. He ain't telling no lies about that. That is true. But the reality of the situation is the consequence of your action is still the same. Whether you decided that whether you had a different circumstance of temptation or not, it's still the same, right? You decided to choose a path which would create broken homes. And so he's almost looking for plaudits in that space. We're going to get to it in a second or two. And I'm gonna get there in a second or two, but I want to just be able to play the clip a little bit just before this, just so you can hear about the emotions aspect and why I said what I said about emotions. Listen to this.
It's a place of refuge, not a place of war.
Right.
So as I'm living, I'm not afraid to say, bro, I cry. Man, my sons make me proud. And even though my dad never verbalized that, I knew what he meant.
Right.
So now what's different is the patience that my children teach me without telling me, Pop, Dad, this is how I learn. Stop yelling at me or stop being soft on me. Tell me what I actually need to do, right? It's those things where it's like, man, we just have a beautiful moment.
So, of course, again, just reiterating that point that he made there about even his kids kind of telling him, you know, about the way they want to be actually taught and the way they want to be expressed to, right? And that's really intriguing because I feel like that further enhances that idea when it comes to dismissive avoidance, that they are misunderstood and misjudged. And so what ends up happening is you'll see that dismissive avoidance get triggered very easily. So what will happen is when they feel like they're about to be misjudged or perceived. Did you notice through the interview how many times he tried to correct her and say, that's not the point I'm making? No, that's not what I said. That's not what I did. Several times he tried to correct her reiteration of what he was saying or the question he was asking because he didn't want to be misunderstood. Now, what does that do? When people start feeling misunderstood, the core wound, it goes back to that core wound, which is that they don't want to be rejected. It's the biggest core wound is that they don't want to be rejected, and the feeling of being rejected because they were rejected as a child. Now, he may say his dad and mom are heroes and angels, but it doesn't matter whether they're hero or angels or not. It's just depending upon what you actually analyze the situation to be when it came to your needs and your wants and how your parents actually handled that. How did you feel? Not when you feel now at 25 and 30. How did you feel as a 12-year-old, as a 9-year-old, as an 8-year-old? How did you feel when your parents necessarily did not fulfill the emotional needs that you had at the point in time? See, you might have grown up and gone, actually, I understand it now, right? But reality hits is that as a child at that point in time, you had emotions that you felt at that given point in time. So again, going back to what we're talking about, this is specific avoidant attachment. It is simply people who try to avoid the emotional connection and avoid closeness to other people, all right? And often in their parental upbringing, what you'll see is dismissive parents who are emotionally dismissive parents, heavy focus on success and academics. So you'll see that parents appreciate and acknowledge and will affirm you in the areas of your academics and sports, but won't affirm you as a human being, as an individual, just being. Right? Like I'll clap for you when you actually do something, rather than actually being I clap for you because you're just who you are, Cam. You are Cam to us, right? And so what you'll see is also there's rejection of physical intimacy. So if you listen to him very carefully in this segment, he actually says that he goes to hug on his child, and what ends up happening is even if the child doesn't want it, he'll give them a hug. Why? Because I think the reason why is because he never experienced that himself. And that gets taken on as a rejection for the dismissive avoidant person who may have wanted to hug the parent or may have wanted a hug from the parent, may have wanted the parent to soothe them when they were emotional or hurt by something or, but never got it, right? Or wanted to, so what you see is that you're trying to rewrite history, okay? And also parental upbringings of highly critical environments. When parents are highly critical in that environment, we can also create people that want to, do dismissive things, which is dismiss their own emotions and tend to avoid. And so in that core wound of rejection, misunderstanding, abandonment, what you'll find out it shows up in the way that we dismiss other people's needs and we dismiss our own. And there's a sensitivity to criticism. This is why he was so hyper with Dr. Bryant. First, because he had watched the interview with Nick Cannon and saw how she went on Nick Cannon. I can't lie to you. When I watched it, I was like, oh, damn. I can see why he was ready to go, because he was like, you're not going to put me in that position. And you have to understand with dismissive avoidance too, there's this air, because they've had to be on their own for so long in terms of had to look after themselves. What you'll realize is there's an air of superiority and pride that comes into the era of self-sufficiency. So we never want to look like we are not self-sufficient. And that includes in intellect too. So a lot of times we pride ourselves in our intellect and our smartness and our understanding and our wisdom and our knowledge. And so when somebody comes who's going to try and dislodge us from that place, what they're really saying is, you're trying to expose me to the rest of the world. It's not going to happen. So he's going to stand on his square 10 times harder. Hence why he was trying to go at her from the very beginning, where he was basically, pointing out a few things which I felt like were unnecessary to point out, right? Like, about her being single, she can't coach people if she's single, and talking about how, that he feels like she is a runner track star. It's the way that he hit those points. It felt personal almost in a way. And it was because he was trying to get her, he was trying to break her mask in the sense of, for him, again, with dismissive avoidance, they have this area of fear of being exposed, because again, once more, they have to be perfect in order to be loved. So we feel like, right? This perfectionism that comes into play. And so what ends up happening is, anybody who tries to remove that mask of perfectionism, right, you're now exposing me again, which can then expose me to rejection. And that can, and I don't want to see that. So when I start seeing that, I'm going to get you before you get me, which is a part of that abandonment wound, which is also a feeling of rejection. So before I get rejected, I'm going to reject you before you reject me. This is why you saw the energy from Cam coming at her so hard at that particular point as well. I want to just play this clip as well about the apart from the emotions, unlocking the emotions, because I think that's a key point in the situation as well, right? So let's have a look at this.
That she is. There's certain things that, as a son, I wish he would have did certain things different, but our parents aren't perfect.
Yeah, but that's all of us as we get older. We aim to do different and better always.
So the thing that my children have taught me is unlocking emotions. And also, it's just not my children, it's my partner now.
So listen very carefully what he said. My children and my partner have helped me unlock my emotions. Why is that? Because he was dismissive of his own emotions before. Because why? Because he had been taught to dismiss his emotions due to the environment that he was actually in. So is it as perfect as he said, as a marriage that he saw from his parents as perfect as he saw? Well, they can have a great marriage, but actually can be very poor parents in some regard, right? They could, and I don't mean like poor because it sounds like they're being bad. What I mean by that is that they could have missed a couple of things when it came to their child, because nobody's perfect, right? So in reality, what he would have wanted, because remember, it's based upon what the child needs, what he would have wanted is more of that emotional connection. He didn't get it. So what he learned to do was suppress, repress, and push away his emotions. Now his children are here, not women, by the way, his children, right? His children are the one that are now teaching him he can have a level of what? Emotions. Why? Because they are not going to what? Reject him. Why? Because they are his blood and they are his children and his seed. And so there's an expectation and a mindset that my children won't reject me. They don't carry the same fear as a partner does. Now, what you might see though, is as those children get older to teenage years, many of you might have experienced this. Your parents might have been very good at the very beginning when you were young. As soon as you got to an age where you can say no and you can learn how to be independent, that parent can suddenly become your enemy. Why? Because the parent realizes they've lost control. They no longer have that dominion over you as a child. You now have the ability to have your own autonomy, your own sovereignty, and to make choices by yourself. And suddenly you don't have to follow their lead anymore. And suddenly they feel unsafe because now you can do the very thing that a woman or a man could do to them. And in this instance with Cam Newton, the children may potentially trigger him later on, not now, where they're like, actually, well, love the fact that you were there financially, but actually we needed more of your time. And that could make him go, well, I did the best I could do. Well, life was life in. And this is where we see a lot of our parents, when we question them about some of their behaviors in towards us, they suddenly clam up, and they're clamming up because suddenly now they suddenly the person who was sitting in front of them, who was their child, who they looked after, who they thought was are going to give them that uncompassionate love, the unconditional love, is suddenly telling them their behavior was off and doing the very thing that someone else who's an adult could actually do towards them. Right? And suddenly now they feel very vulnerable. And so they clam up and close up. And instead of actually being honest and open about maybe their mistakes and they're falling short, they are looking for no judgment and no criticism and no and looking for a safe space from their child. Right? So men and women can do this, by the way, right? But we often see this with women oftentimes because they're the ones that are usually the caretaker. But it's interesting to see Cam do this as well, right? Well, I'm not saying he's going to necessarily do that in the future. We don't know. But just to say that obviously he learned emotions through his children means that he wasn't actually very in tune with his own emotions. If he wasn't in tune with his emotions, more than likely he wasn't in tune with his wants and his needs appropriately, the way he really needs them, And that's why he's a runner and track star himself, why he's created several broken homes, because he doesn't even really realize what he really needs, right? And that is something that he needs to work on. So I'm gonna leave it there. I'll do definitely some more breakdowns of this, but I wanted to highlight those things because I felt like when he also says that love is transactional, that is also a part of the aspect of a emotionally dismissive person, is that they don't feel like people can love them all the way through. Here's why: because they're not in tune with themselves to be able to even receive that love, and so they won't even receive the love that's necessary.
Or his function up to his
100%, 100%,
Right.
100%,
But
100%.
so now
100%.
100%
Yeah,
this too.
100%.
A woman
Yeah.
who has this.
Mhm.
This is not
Absolutely.
hookah smoking and standing on couches
Right.
and
Twerking
sex.
and doing
No,
all
it's
this.
not that.
Right.
This is sugar daddy's addy in here. This is businesswoman. No, you need to. We need to get this on.
Oh,
I see it happen
Yeah.
so many times.
Wow.
Dress code. You're not coming here with Jordans and flip flops. Like you can't do that. You can't disrespect the altitude.
Yeah, the culture of what's here.
You see what I'm saying?
100%. Yeah.
So
yeah.
with that, I know and I understand. A lot of people see my situation and I think that I'm not high function.
Okay, so I'm gonna leave it there because I think part 3 we can break that more down as well, because he was just about to talk about his perception again when it comes to dismissive avoidance, because they are part of that insecure attachment. What can end up happening too is that actually when they're looking at relationships, they actually project as well. I'm one of those people, so I know they project, right? People think that I'm not high functioning. Who told you that, Cam? Who told you that? Who told you that you're not high functioning? So I think if you're a dismissive avoidant person, you can identify some of the thoughts here. Your parents have neglected you, have avoided you, have not done what they need to do in terms of, you know, being in a place where they can supply your emotional needs. And what that does is it creates a wound of rejection, misunderstanding, abandonment. And whenever those things get triggered, you tend to show up in a particular way, right? Sensitivity to criticism, your black and white judgment, you run away from conflict, you're hyper independent and ask for help, you emotionally dismiss your own needs and others as well. And you can have this feeling of feeling broken and not being able to love people the way they need to be loved, which is because you don't also receive the love in the way that you want to, because you've not actually dealt with the fact that you're rejecting yourself. Rejection of others is really a rejection of yourself. The fear of people rejecting you is really a rejection of your own self. Okay, make sure you like, share, subscribe, click on that bell button for notification of uploads. At the moment, we do not have any more coaching spaces. What I do have is emergency coaching. So I have some spaces that are for emergency purposes, meaning what I mean by that is a queue jump. So if you want to be able to queue jump, by all means, jump in there. We'll definitely love to accommodate you guys. It does cost a little bit, cost more, but it's always worth it. The work that we put in there, we go through things, we break it to the root cause as well for you guys. So make sure you guys like, share, subscribe, click on that bell button for notification of uploads. We appreciate you guys. Stay locked.